Thanks for tuning in to watch The Ordinary Filmmaker. It's October the 9th, 2021, and here in Canada it's Thanksgiving weekend. But before I can enjoy my Thanksgiving turkey and pumpkin pie, there's a couple of news stories that I need to get out because they're pretty significant. You know that list that Canon has of products that are in short supply due to supply chain issues? Well, I've added a lot of new bodies and lenses to that list. But worst, the second story that I'm going to cover comes from Canon rumors from a reliable source stating that many products due out in 2021 have been cancelled, not discontinued. And I'll get to the minor distinction between when a product is cancelled or discontinued shortly. But what's more important is, why are we still here in 2021? What has caused these supply shortages? And it's not as obvious as you might think. And then, of course, once I answer that question, I'm then going to answer, when are we going to get back to normal? But without further ado, let's take a look at our first story. Canon has added a lot of bodies and lenses to a list of products in short supply due to supply chain issues. Sadly, the Canon EOS R3 is one of those products, but we're not really surprised, are we? And the recently announced 5.2mm dual fisheye lens, it's not coming out in 2021, despite what we heard a few days ago. It's going to be in 2022 as well. But now we have a whole list of lenses that are on that product shortlist. The 14 to 35, 16mm, the 100 to 400, the 100 to 500, the 100mm macro, the 400, and the 600mm. And that's a large chunk of products. Those are products that are in high demand. And here's the problem. With all those products in short supply, Canon not able to produce them, be able to get them to retailers on time, that is money that they're leaving on the table. That is money that you're willing to give up to give to them to get these products. And that affects a company's bottom line. But it gets a little bit worse. According to Canon rumors, a reliable source has said that many of the products planned for 2021 have been canceled. Now, this doesn't mean they've been discontinued. So, for example, the Canon EOS RP is one of those products that's been canceled for 2021. Now, there's still going to be a Canon EOS RP replacement, but what canceled mean is the planned product launch and production of that camera has been canceled. And what Canon's going to do is they're going to go back and look at the product and make changes. They're going to improve the specifications, the capabilities, because if they go ahead and release it in 2022, when it was initially planned for 2021, they're going to release a product that we're all going to look at and go like, yeah, it would have been great in 2021, but here in 2022, it doesn't compete very well against the Sony X or the Nikon B. And that's why they're discontinuing many products. Now, we don't really know what products those are, but Craig goes on to speculate as to which ones he thinks they are. And it's no surprise that the Canon Cinema EOS C50 and C90 are also affected. These were supposed to be coming out in 2021. So he suspects those have been canceled, along with the EOS RP. And he also wonders that some of the cameras coming out at NAB 2021, like the two 8K cinema cameras, the Super 35 and the full frame, as well as the 4K camera, might also be affected. It's a tough time. We've got, what is it now, about a year and a half, going on a year and a half, year and 3/4 of these supply shortages, despite the economy improving, people going back to work, people starting to travel, all the economic indicators show that things are starting to get better. So why are supply issues getting worse? Why are we here? Well, I want to take you back to early 2020. Now, the first time I noticed any issue was right around the end of March, early April. I have a Toyota RAV4 and the rear hatch wouldn't open up. So knowing the warranty was coming due within a couple of weeks, I took it into Toyota and they said, yep, we've got to order some parts and we'll get back to you once they're in. I thought they forgot about me. It took 2 months to get those parts and to get the work done. 2 months. Well, going back to February and March, we started to see signs that things weren't going normally. We started to see leading indicators. And it started with a couple of restaurant chains in the United States running out of key ingredients to make, of all things, bubble tea. And bubble tea, it's basically a nice sugary drink with tapioca balls in it. Well, those tapioca balls were hard to get. But it was only by a few chains. Not a lot of people were seeing this difference. But as days turned into weeks, those shortages proliferated across North America, and then we started to see prices increase. And as this was starting to happen, we were noticing that other products coming from Asia were in short supply and prices were going up. Bare necessities of life, toilet paper, paper towels, diapers, they were becoming in short supply. And why is this? Well, right around March, people were starting to work from home. People were getting laid off. Plants were closing. Businesses were closing. Travel was shutting down. But this didn't stop people shopping. In fact, shopping increased dramatically because people were at home. And online shopping is what increased. It increased significantly. And a lot of the products we buy, guess what? They have microchips in them. So we had a huge increase of products. So let's go back to our tapioca restaurant. They were stuck not being able to produce any of these drinks. But the companies making those tapioca balls in Taiwan and elsewhere, they were producing. They were having no problems producing. And a lot of the other items that we had trouble getting around March into April were also being produced in large quantities. Yes, some factories are being closed down, but by and large, there were a lot of plants that were producing, that weren't having any problems. So there's plenty of output, there's plenty of demand. Where's the problem? Well, this is where we talk about the supply chain, and it's the shipping aspect. So once you produce it and a truck picks it up, and then a truck delivers it to a distribution center or your home, everything in there got disrupted. Now, at first, what we started to happen, if you live around Vancouver, LA, or Longport, major shipping ports of North America, what you're going to notice around this time is instead of seeing a few container ships anchored off the coast in the bay, you probably started to see dozens and dozens of these ships. And if you do remember that, let me know in the comment section down below. But we started to see dozens of these ships, and what that meant is there was a huge bottleneck. We had all these ships coming in, delivering all these products that you were ordering from around the world, but they were stuck in harbor. And what did that do? That effectively doubled shipping times, which also increased prices. But wait, there's more. You had all these dock workers that were trying to get these containers off the ships in quick time. And then once those ships were taken off, you had trucks that would take those containers quickly out of the port. They would take them to distribution centers and other places before you would even consider getting them. Well, dock workers started to get sick, so they were running short of dock workers. And truckers started to get sick, so they started running out of truckers. And the people that were still working were working longer hours. They hired more people, they paid people more, but people were working long hours, long days, 6-7 days a week, 12-hour days or longer. And so the system was strained. And not only that, because you had all these containers parked off the coast being dealt with, you had far more containers here at the destination in North America than where they were needed to pack up more stuff to send back to us. So to give you an idea, for every, let's say, 100 or so containers that were arriving at these ports, some 40 or 50 were going back. Less than half were going back. So what did that do? Well, that increased the demand for shipping containers, which increased the price. So you could see that shipping cost more, the availability of shipping containers and ships became a bottleneck, the ports became a bottleneck, so even if you could ship it, it couldn't get to the customers quickly enough. And some stuff, produce actually started to spoil because they were stuck out waiting longer than they should have. It started to affect grocery chains as well. So the shortage of truck drivers, container ships, containers, and the ability to offload and get those goods onto trucks created a proliferation of scarcity and, of course, increased prices. There was also a series of bad decisions. Automakers in general thought that this decline in the economy was going to be exaggerated, much like it was in the Great Depression or other recessions, and we weren't going to pick up for at least a year or two. Well, they were sadly mistaken, because people were still getting paid from being at home. They were sent home. Governments were helping them out. So people still had an income, and they were still buying. They still had a need. So very quickly, the demand for cars and other products increased. But car companies, fearing that this was going to extend for very long, canceled their chip orders, their component orders, their parts orders. Now, certain materials like plastics or other raw materials, they were able to get no problem. But you see, there's one product or product group that has absolutely no elasticity in any way whatsoever, and that's chips, semiconductors. You see, prior to 2020, The semiconductor market was already at capacity. It had very limited capacity to absorb more growth. Now, semiconductor foundries like TSMC, they knew about this, and so they had planned to produce more plants. It was on the roadmap based on the growth they had seen up until then. Well, with this increase in demand from online shopping, people being at home, they're buying stuff, they're buying lots of stuff. Hey, let's buy a camera. Let's do deck repairs. Let's build decks, pools, all these things. And even while decks and pools don't require a lot of semiconductors, a lot of the businesses supporting them do. And a lot of components going into pools, like regulation systems, support semiconductors. And even building decks, people are putting lights on with those little lights that use solar panels to power things. Well, use semiconductors. So what happens is once these car companies canceled their orders, they went to the back of the line. It doesn't matter how big of a customer they were. The market was saturated. They went to the back of the line. And on top of that, other companies, they saw what was happening. They realized that this marketplace, semiconductors, could not absorb a huge demand, and they went and ordered more. They doubled down. Companies like Apple and others, they purchased more, putting more demand for semiconductors, making it much more difficult for those that cancel orders to get back in. And not only that, you see, semiconductors also use silicone. And guess what also uses silicone? Vaccinations, those vials. So foundries like TSMC Semiconductor decided to announce they're going to produce additional plants, but it takes about 3 years for these plants to come online. You see, they're very technical. The equipment used in them is very rare and scarce. In fact, some machinery is only produced by a single company. And you can't just call them up and say, look, we need a couple of these chip making machines. Can you have them by next month? No, it can take years to ramp up production to get everything in place. So essentially you're looking at 3 years for a new chip foundry. And the earliest a new chip foundry from TSMC is going to come online is right around 2023. And of course, we still have to get through that backlog. Now, there are some things that could change the demand. If people start spending their money less on tangible items, on things like travel or going to the movies or eating out, if they spend less time buying actual products, that will help. But otherwise, I don't see the chip shortage improving anytime until 2023, mid to late 2023 at the earliest, and most likely continuing into 2024. But there's another reason as to why this got to where it is. Why did car companies make these bad decisions? Why do we have an inability in the market system to absorb this increased demand to deal with this disaster? Well, now we have to travel back in time a little bit. If we go back to the 1960s and 1970s, well, let's go back to the 60s first. The Japanese car makers weren't in high demand like they are today. They weren't that great. They didn't look that great. And not only were they not the best looking cars, they had problems. They weren't the reliable, dependable cars they are today. But as the years went on, and people were laughing at Japanese cars back then, but as the 60s moved into the 70s, people stopped laughing at Japanese cars. You see, they became reliable and dependable, and they became cheap. And not only that, the 1970s brought a fuel crisis that lasted for about 10 years. And so people started buying these Japanese cars in huge quantities. And Toyota, in particular, was a very, very efficient company. They introduced a system called just-in-time inventory, which is everywhere today. And if you look at some of the car companies prior to 2020, I remember I was watching this television program, a documentary about this car company in the UK, where they had their plant, and all around this plant were their suppliers, and they wouldn't keep more inventory than basically about an hour's worth of inventory. At some points, inventory would drop down to about 5 or 10 minutes availability until a truck started offloading more inventory into the plant. You see, when Toyota came up with just-in-time inventory, it wasn't about eliminating inventory. It was about eliminating excess inventory. It was about looking at your entire supply chain, looking at what parts and materials that you were bringing into your business. Now, the products, the parts that you were bringing in to make these cars, if they were made of plastic components, plastic resin, or came from industries that were very tolerant to disruptions, they were very elastic, you would only keep maybe a few days or a few hours worth of supply of those products. But Toyota, they looked at other components, especially leading up to 2020. They looked at other components such as semiconductors. They knew that this marketplace was not elastic. They knew that it couldn't tolerate a major disruption. A flood, for example, and these are the things they were thinking about. A flood. After all, about 10 years ago, Japan suffered a major tsunami, which really wiped out a lot of businesses and created a major disruption. Years before that, we had a flood in Thailand. Yes, it was Thailand. And that's what they were expecting. So for a lot of their cars, they will keep about 6 months worth of inventory of chips. Now, chips aren't very big. They don't take up a lot of room. But they ensure that their business model is able to continue. So when things hit in 2020, Toyota was one of those companies that was able to perform far better than many others. But you see, that 6 months of inventory didn't help, because here we are a year and a half later, they're having troubles like the rest of us. But what they did foresee is that when this hit, instead of cutting orders, they reached out to their suppliers and said, we want to double, we want to triple, we want to get as much as we can. So we have the perfect storm. We have everybody working from home, an increase in demand from online shipping. Online shipping increased dramatically. We have a shortage of shipping containers because we have a shortage of human resources to offload. There's only so much capacity to offload these container ships. We have a shortage of truckers. We have people being kept on ships that can't get off. We have people quitting and leaving. Then we also have a major shortage in semiconductors, which is used for everything around the world, all products pretty well. It's a perfect storm. So now that we know how we got here, when is this going to get better? Well, my predictions are we're going to start to see capacity lift, or we're going to start to see the shortages lift somewhere around mid to late 2023, but we're not going to get fully back to normal until 2024. And as I mentioned, one caveat to that is if people, instead of purchasing a huge amount of stuff online and through stores, in other words, tangible items like laptops, watches, cameras, lenses, ninjas, lights, if they start going places, if they start spending money on experiences, traveling, going to museums, eating out, purchasing wines, all those other items, then that will increase the pressure on the supply chain and help it lighten up. And even companies like Apple, who have done a very good job of ensuring they lock up inventory in the millions of units for a given product to ensure that they are able to get the products to market. But when those products can't get on a boat or can't get on a plane, that's the problem. And that's what we're seeing with the just-in-time inventory problem, with products being made from around the world. And in the case of this laptop, for example, different components and parts might come from 30 different countries, or they might pass through 5 different countries. And that's staggering. It's no wonder that we're having products discontinued, canceled, delayed, still this far late into 2021. And one other big important thing, please go ahead and click subscribe and like. You've been enjoying this video, and I don't mind producing it for free, but here's the thing. If you don't click like and subscribe, YouTube isn't going to take that video that I produced, this video, and share it to more people, because what they look at is they see your engagement, producing comments, clicking like and subscribe, as showing that you're interested in this video. You're not just clicking play and walking away. You're watching, so when ads come up, they know they're getting money for it. So please go ahead and click like and subscribe, as it really does help this channel grow, because YouTube will then take this video and show it to more people. But thank you. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate that. If you do have any questions or comments about the material I've discussed in this video, go ahead and put them in the comment section down below. But that's it for now. I'm going to quickly edit this video, put it out there, and then I'm going to go out and enjoy the rest of my Thanksgiving weekend. My son says he wants to go rake the leaves. They're not quite colorful yet, but many of the trees here are starting to change. I'll share some footage with you in the near future. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.